Something uncomfortable happens when a mind becomes too aware. The more precisely you see people, patterns, motives, and inconsistencies, the harder it becomes to remain emotionally close to them. And if you're watching this, there's a strong chance you've already felt the shift. Not suddenly, slowly, quietly. People who once felt familiar start feeling distant. Conversations feel thinner. Interactions feel rehearsed. And before you fully realize what's happening, your world has become smaller. Most people think intelligent individuals distance themselves because they dislike others. That explanation is comforting, it's simple, but it's also wrong. There's a deeper mechanism operating beneath the behavior, and once it activates, relationships start changing in ways that feel strangely inevitable. The unsettling part is that the distancing rarely begins as a conscious decision. It begins in the nervous system. Your brain has a system called threat perception circuitry. Its job is simple: scan environments, predict risks, and protect your identity from harm. For most people, this system runs in the background. But when cognitive awareness increases, that system becomes more sensitive. You begin detecting subtleties others miss, micro-contradictions, emotional inconsistencies, hidden motivations. And when your brain detects patterns that suggest instability or potential rejection, another process quietly activates: identity preservation bias. This is the mind's way of protecting its sense of self. If a relationship begins to threaten your emotional equilibrium, your brain slowly begins creating distance before the threat fully materializes. In human terms, it feels like this: you start pulling away from people without fully understanding why. This is where the early loop begins. Because the question that quietly forms in the background is unsettling. If distancing keeps happening in relationship after relationship, is the problem actually the people, or is something inside you changing? Psychologist John Bowlby, the pioneer of attachment theory, described how early emotional experiences condition the nervous system to either pursue closeness or regulate distance. But what often gets overlooked is how intelligence alters this equation. Greater pattern recognition means the brain doesn't just react to events, it anticipates them. And anticipation changes behavior. You start noticing things earlier than others do: the subtle shift in tone when someone loses interest, the micro-expressions that reveal irritation, the hidden competition inside casual conversations. These signals activate your avoidance reinforcement loop, a feedback mechanism where the brain learns that emotional distance reduces potential pain. Every time you withdraw and avoid disappointment, the brain records it as a successful survival strategy. Distance becomes safer. But here's where the psychological tension deepens, because while this process feels rational, something else is happening simultaneously. The same awareness that protects you from emotional harm also makes genuine connection harder to sustain. You begin filtering people more aggressively. Conversations that once felt interesting now feel predictable. Social interactions begin to resemble scripts you've already analyzed. And the more you observe these patterns, the more you become detached. This is where it turns. The distancing doesn't just protect you from pain, it also removes the unpredictability that allows intimacy to form. In neuroscience terms, your brain is reducing relational exposure. Less exposure means fewer opportunities for emotional disruption, but it also means fewer opportunities for closeness. And over time, this creates a strange paradox. The more intelligent the pattern recognition becomes, the harder it becomes to relax inside relationships. Imagine your mind like a security system inside a house. In the beginning, it's designed to alert you to real threats, but over time, the sensitivity increases. Eventually, it starts detecting everything: footsteps outside, shifting wind, minor vibrations. At that point, the alarm isn't just protecting the house, it's preventing anyone from entering. Intelligent people often mistake this hyper-awareness for emotional maturity. They believe they're simply becoming more selective, more discerning. But sometimes the brain is doing something far more defensive. It's building psychological distance before closeness has the chance to challenge your identity. Because connection carries a hidden risk. The closer someone gets, the more power they gain to disrupt how you see yourself. They can reject you, misunderstand you, leave. Your nervous system knows this, so it begins solving the problem preemptively. You start withdrawing earlier. Relationships end before vulnerability deepens. Distance becomes your emotional default. And the most deceptive part of this pattern is how logical it feels while it's happening. You tell yourself the conversations are shallow. You convince yourself the people around you simply lack depth. But occasionally, late at night, a quieter question appears. What if the distance isn't proof of superiority, but evidence of avoidance? This is the part no one warns you about. The same psychological mechanism that protects intelligent individuals from emotional chaos can slowly remove them from the environments where connection actually forms. Over time, the brain begins associating solitude with stability, less emotional unpredictability, less identity threat, less relational friction. And once that association becomes strong enough, something subtle begins to change inside your personality. Loneliness stops feeling painful. It starts feeling normal. At first, this seems like emotional strength, independence, self-sufficiency. But under the surface, the nervous system may be adapting to reduced connection by lowering its expectation of closeness. The brain literally recalibrates what it believes relationships should feel like. And when that happens, something else follows. You stop reaching. You stop initiating. You stop expecting people to truly understand you. This is where the distancing pattern becomes self-reinforcing. Less effort leads to fewer meaningful interactions. Fewer interactions confirm the belief that deep connection is rare. That belief strengthens the distance. The loop closes. But there's a deeper layer here that rarely gets discussed. Intelligent people often build their identity around perception, being observant, analytical, hard to fool, hard to manipulate, and that identity becomes something worth protecting. So when relationships require vulnerability, uncertainty, emotional risk, the possibility of misunderstanding, the brain interprets that exposure as a threat to the identity itself. Distance preserves the image of control. Closeness introduces unpredictability. This is where the emotional cost begins to accumulate, because the mind may successfully avoid rejection, but it also prevents the experiences that would disprove the fear. And slowly, quietly, the prediction becomes reality. You begin living in smaller social circles. Fewer people truly know you. Fewer conversations feel meaningful. At first, it seems like preference. Then it becomes lifestyle. Eventually, it becomes personality. If this pattern continues long enough, the brain begins interpreting solitude as evidence that connection simply isn't meant for you. That prediction can shape years of your life. But the most important insight appears when you revisit the question we planted earlier. If distancing keeps happening, is the problem the people, or is something inside the pattern? The answer is rarely comfortable. Intelligence increases awareness of relational flaws, but it can also magnify perceived threats that were never certain to occur. Sometimes the mind withdraws not because rejection is inevitable, but because avoiding the possibility feels safer than discovering the truth. And that distinction changes everything. Because the distance you feel may not be the result of seeing too clearly. It may be the result of protecting yourself too early. Understanding that mechanism doesn't instantly reverse it. Awareness rarely works that way. But it does reveal something important about the architecture of loneliness. It isn't always caused by a lack of connection. Sometimes it's caused by the brain becoming too efficient at preventing emotional risk. And once you recognize that system, you begin seeing the pattern everywhere, not just in yourself, but in how people navigate closeness across their entire lives, which leads to a deeper question that deserves its own examination. What actually happens to the brain after years of emotional self-protection? Because the long-term psychological effects are far more strange than most people realize. And once you see that pattern, you'll never look at loneliness the same way again. If this kind of psychological dissection resonates with you, you may want to stay close to the channel, because the next layer of this conversation goes much deeper.